Okay, we're back on. It's time to talk about Dungeons and Dragons. This time it's for the Dungeon Master, and this is the monthly discussion that we have about dungeon mastering. All the questions you might have, we're hopefully going to have an opportunity to answer. And there's bound to be some people in the chat room who will be able to share information with you about all sorts of different things. Now, this is interesting. I'm just seeing that it is running kind of slow. I'm not sure why that is the case. It seems to be all right here. And I'm suddenly getting a whole lot of notifications. Just bear with me as I get bombarded by notifications from everybody under the sun. I do apologise, they're not finishing yet. Okay, right. Oh my, that was interesting. I honestly don't know what was going on there. Just give me a second. I'm not sure why I'm having so much trouble keeping this live stream going. It is sort of trying to bottom out a little bit. I'm just going to make some adjustments just to make sure I can clean it up a bit. So just give me a second. If I jump out and it disappears on you, it's because I'm making adjustments and I can't do that while it's running. Usually I can't anyway. No, I can't. I'm going to have to actually dump it. So I'll be back in. Okay. I'm hoping that this time round it's actually going to come through and be a bit cleaner. I do apologise, I just wanted to make sure everything was working correctly, and so hence I restarted, changed and made some adjustments, and that should hopefully mean that the live stream will be a little bit cleaner than it was before, and you have less trouble staying in the room. We'll just give it a second while it sort of cleans up, but essentially look, you will find the start time while people are jumping into the room. You'll see the start time down in the description as I normally do for those of you who are re-watching the live stream. If you've never been part of my live stream, normally what I would do is present everything first and then I answer questions, but that's not the format for today. The format is I'm going to do a little bit of an introduction, like a couple of minutes, if that, probably less than that in fact, and then you can ask as many questions as you like. And while I'm waiting for people to ask questions and say hi, how's it going, Bread Snake? Yay, it is a live stream. While you're typing in your questions into the live stream chat box, I'm going to present some information I have prepared, and we can have a discussion on it if people want to, or we can not worry about that. It's really completely up to you guys. Okay, so let's get started with the gist of this, shall we? Okay, right, sound seems to be coming through all right, so that's good news. This is sort of my December Christmassy live stream, as it happens. This will be the last Dungeon Master questions and answers for this year. So a little bit sad, but it has to happen at some point, right? Okay, so let's start. Hi, welcome to HowtoDandD. My name is Fred Wheeler, and today I want to talk about Dungeons and Dragons 5e. In fact, we can talk about Dungeons and Dragons full stop. It doesn't really matter what version of the game it is. Essentially, this is your Dungeon Master Q&A for December 2018. And I am happy to answer any question you might have if I can answer the question. And if I can't answer the question, I guarantee that somebody in the chat will probably have a go at providing you with some solid advice. So I like this D&D meme because it says newbie dungeon masters or GMs mistakes. That treasure wasn't supposed to break the game, I swear. Everybody makes this sort of mistake, whether you're a new dungeon master or an experienced and veteran dungeon master. You're always going to introduce something to the game that really sort of throws a spanner in the works that you weren't expecting, and has an effect that you can't foresee because there are so many variables to the game, right? And what I'd like to say is that I was hunting around for some of the old Dungeon Master Guide covers, looking for an image that I thought would tell me more about sort of what to expect and what we make these sorts of videos about. And when it comes to a Dungeon Master, it's like opening the doors to monsters, encounters, treasure, and a huge array of different things that make the game what it is, that we don't really know all the answers to, and the only way we figure that out is by trial and error and a little bit of advice from somebody else as we go. Okay, so we're going to my screen. You're going to get to see my face today. Yes, I am wearing a hat. As it happens, Sometimes I do wear hats, not always, but this is the day that it actually happens. You will get me with a hat on. I believe this is about as Christmassy as I thought I should go. I did have another hat for those of you who are wondering what other hats I had available. So the red hat is one. And then I've got this sort of Santa hat, but it sort of looks kind of weird, because if I put it on and I do this, I kind of feel like a pom-pom unicorn. And then if I turn it this way, just a little bit like that, I feel more like I'm out of kilter and not quite right. And then if I turn like this, it doesn't really seem like a Christmas hat completely. It sort of feels like there's a bit missing, like the pom-pom's not visible, and therefore I've put the hat on incorrectly. So in the end, I decided to skip the pom-pom and go with just the red hat. And I thought that would be a better way of dealing with my live stream. For those of you who are wondering what the background is, that is Alice in Wonderland. I think Alice in Wonderland is, much like The Wizard of Oz, is a really good example of fantasy. And it's kind of funny how both of the main characters are female too, and they're both girls. They're not sort of, it's not like a woman, it's a girl. And they're not boys, and they're not men, and yet they are probably one of the most recognizable children's stories that revolve around fantasy and storytelling, and there are elements to Dungeons and Dragons all the time that have been taken from Alice in Wonderland and The Wizard of Oz. And I would like to point out there is an adventure called Beyond the Magic Mirror that Gary Gygax essentially just stole straight out of Alice looking through the I can't remember the title. I know I've got the book. It's on the tip of my tongue. It's the second book from the Alice in Wonderland series, as far as I know. And he appropriated so much of that information and knowledge directly from there. So while I'm chatting, this is your opportunity to type in your questions and your feedback. You can say hi to me. If you have a question that's been outstanding that you would like to talk about, then absolutely, this is your opportunity to talk about it. Thank you. Thank you, Bread Snake. Alice Through the Looking Glass. That's it. Yes, I knew I was close. Just couldn't quite get it out. Sometimes I can't. But thank you, Bread Snake. That made it a lot easier. And he's literally taken that story and turned it into a Dungeons and Dragons adventure. I did the same thing with The Wizard of Oz. I made one of my adventures revolve completely around that story. I took some of those elements, I changed them. They were still relatively recognizable. And when you're making your own adventures, you don't need to make everything completely original. It's all right to take elements from other stories that other people have made. Really, Dungeons and Dragons and being a dungeon master is about pinching, borrowing and stealing from other people who have come up with ideas, and you mix it around a little bit to make it your own. And that's how I see it. Okay. So while I'm waiting for people to ask questions, I had spent a little bit of time looking at the topic of the rule of cool. For those of you who don't know anything about the rule of cool, it's essentially saying that allow the player's characters to do something that's awesome and inspired and interesting and exciting to make the game better and more fun. And I want to talk about that aspect, but I want to go to Alpha Beat because he's just chimed in. What do you think about deadly encounters for the party? I believe that deadly encounters for the party should exist. I include very, very easy encounters. I include medium, hard, very hard, and I always include deadly encounters. And usually what I will do is I will have quite a lot of easy to medium encounters so that the players' characters, or the players should I say, not the characters, the players drop into a false sense of security about themselves, so that when they get this deadly encounter, they might view this as an encounter that can be winnable, but it's not. And usually there are plenty of signals to indicate that it's not. So I think they are a good thing. I think that there needs to be a mix, because if it's always something that you can potentially win and succeed in, then where's the tension? Where's the build-up? Does every encounter have to be winnable? No, I don't believe it does. It's okay to have deadly encounters as long as the party can choose to engage. See, even that for me, you know, as a new dungeon master with a new group of players, I would absolutely make sure that if I present a deadly encounter, it's probably going to be around level 5. I want them to get used to the game system from about level 1 through to 5, and about level 5, when the power creep jumps in, I'm going to start producing and presenting encounters that are much more difficult once I am sure they understand the game system they are playing in. But once that's happened, I will start to present new players with deadly encounters, and I will allow for an engagement where there is a chance of escape, where I know there's definitely an opportunity for escape. But with an experienced player who's playing at higher levels, like beyond level 5, where they have access to things like teleport and Misty Step, Dimension Door, things that are, fog cloud, all those sorts of things that can control and have such a huge impact on the game. I don't necessarily worry about a deadly encounter with experienced players being winnable or having an escape route, because I don't know if there is an escape route, and I won't intentionally make one. I will leave it to them to figure out if there is one, and if there isn't, I don't really worry about it. I'm not married to the concept of character death being the end of a character playing in my game. There's so many ways of bringing a character back, so I don't really worry about that sort of thing. But I am absolutely, I like the idea of presenting deadly encounters, because the stakes go up, the tension builds, and that's how you scare your players. You scare your players, you scare the characters. So that's my view on it. But as I said, I think that if you're going to give them deadly encounters, wait a little bit till they get familiar with the game system. Once they're familiar and they're more experienced, then I would go from deadly with the option to escape and run away, to deadly where there's not necessarily a way of escaping. Because I've run games once characters have died and we just continued on in the land of the dead. The story changes. Every dungeon master is different, so just because I'm voicing this view doesn't mean it's the correct one, by the way. So hopefully I answered your question, Alphabet. If I did, good. If I didn't, never mind. I do apologise. You will let me know what I needed to highlight. So as I said, you're welcome to ask questions. Just type in there. It's really easy for me to pick out the questions if you type questions and then go from there. Alphabet, yes, thank you. Got it, excellent. So back to the rule of cool while we're waiting for questions to come through. So you allow the players to have their characters do something awesome or fantastic or out of the ordinary. Maybe it's jump onto a dragon and stab it with daggers to hold in place. Maybe it's to hurl the gnome or halfling across the room at a group of orcs with their dagger and rapier drawn, pointed out. Maybe it's to leap across from one shelf ledge to another shelf ledge. It might be to swing on a vine like Tarzan through the jungle and grabbing onto various vines as they travel at a fast rate trying to escape their pursuers. It could be all sorts of things. You could even go as far as the Gods of War. You know, if you've played that video game, there are lots of elements in that game that are just amazingly crazy, where you have to mash buttons in the right order to make everything work. And you can certainly pull those ideas, and that's sort of what we're talking about, the rule of cool. Antonio, I like deadly encounters. It changes the way players play when they know there's a real chance the actions they will have lethal consequences. Well, I think that's exactly it. It's very hard to get an emotional response from a player to what you're doing. And sometimes you need to mix things up and change the equilibrium of your game to make that work. Hang on. I think I got it right. Lethodos. Have I got your name right? You'll let me know. Lethodos. Okay, so talking about deadly encounters. Got myself stuck in a room where the other side of a door was a queen spider and a sword spider. A queen spider and a sword spider. What is a sword spider? A queen spider, I kind of got the idea. I understand. How would you get out of that? It really depends on what I have available. You know, if you're stuck in a room with spiders, how do you get out of that location? Do you have the ability to shape the stone around you with a spell? Do you have access to something like teleport? Do you have the opportunity to transform into a mist and go through the cracks in the wall or under the door? All those things are sort of options. You know, when I think about the sorts of things that my players have done to escape really deadly encounters, I've seen them use Dimension Door, I've seen them use Teleport. Some of them have taken characters and if they're small enough, they've shoved them into a bag of holding or shrunk them down, shoved them into their pocket or a bag of holding, teleported it out, anything that they could think of to escape a location. In some cases, there might have been more than one character who has taken different routes, and not everybody has escaped, you know? Sometimes there's only been somebody who's escaping the encounter, not everybody. Antonio, what classes are in your party? Well, yeah, well, it depends on your resources and what the classes are, and what level they are too. No classes, weird system. No classes, weird system. No classes means that they can pretty much do anything they want. It's obviously a slightly different system of play compared to the Dungeons and Dragons that we're usually used to, where there are classes. So yeah, not too sure what to do and say about that. Spider with front legs are swords. Okay, so it's a spider and their front legs. What, the first two or the first four? First two are swords, so they use them to attack with. Very, very creative dungeon master. Very strange. I like it. Sounds really cool. Antonio, can you set the door on fire? Yes. Pour oil on the door, burn the door. Is that going to be quick enough? Do you have a vial of acid where you can pour acid on the lock to burn the lock out so you can then kick the door down? Do you just take your axe to this door if it's not a stone door or metal door? Is it a wooden door and you can just cut your way through? Do you just smash it with a mace? There's a lot of different options. Do you cast a spell which shrinks the door down? Yeah, just got to think outside of the circle rather than outside of the square or outside of the circle. Outside of the boundaries that you think have been set for your game, and then you'll get somewhere. And you know, your dungeon master might not have set it up in such a way that it's going to lead to death. Maybe there's an objective that you need to perform rather than fighting the spider. Maybe there's something in that location you need to do to be successful. A lot of people keep thinking that when you're facing a monster, it's about killing the monster, and when you kill the monster, you win. Whereas it's not always that case at all. What else we got here? Lithondos. I'm going to wind up pronouncing it different every single time. I can see it now. I got out of it, just wanted to see your ideas. Alright, fair enough. You're testing me, I see. It's a heavily homebrewed RuneQuest game. Okay, got it. I turned the sword spider into a familiar and, what's that? Sicked it on the queen spider. Right, okay. So you polymorphed it. There you go, there's another one. Polymorph is a pretty often used spell. I've turned a dragon into a fish. I know my players have turned a kraken into a worm and put it in a jar and then just left it where it was and thrown it back into the sea and then run away. All sorts of possibilities exist. Outside of the box, outside of the square, outside of the box, outside of the circle. It doesn't have to be a circle, it could be something else. It's into a pet. No, it's into a pet. I tried to teleport. You tried to teleport. Okay, I get it. Okay, so let's go back to the rule of cool while I'm waiting for questions to come through. So what's the deal with the rule of cool? There are a couple of videos on YouTube. Okay, so you turned it into a pet. I got it. Excellent. With regard to the rule of cool, there's a couple of videos on YouTube that you can watch. There's a little bit of information on the internet regarding the rule of cool. I've had plenty of experience with the rule of cool, although a friend of mine, that would be Mark Denham, he would probably say that I'm terrible at this, but I have done things very differently to what I do now, so that's why things have adjusted. And Mark, you can say whatever you like. Alphabet, what do you got here? How do you manage not talking to your players about all your great ideas, upcoming stuff? To be fair, I don't really worry about telling them about all of my great ideas that are upcoming. They're going to find out about my stuff when I do it, when I present it in the adventure. And I almost always don't present and create anything that I don't really create material for just myself that I won't be presenting to my players' characters. So if there's a backstory to something, a creature or a monster or an NPC that only I would ever know the information on and the players could never seek or gain that information, I don't really bother creating it. Now, although that means it makes it a little bit harder to flesh out a character or a monster or an NPC, what it means is if I'm always willing to have some way of them accessing that information, whether it be finding out through any sort of means, you can speak with dead, finding a diary, finding a wall painting, anything that will tell that story, I want my players to find that out for themselves rather than tell them about it. So I don't really worry about that sort of thing. I know it's coming. I don't really get caught up in that. I don't know if that necessarily answers your question. I don't know that it will necessarily be helpful to you either. It's just something you will get used to. Antonio, what do you got here? What's your favourite class, race to play? Do you mostly DM or do you also play? Okay, I haven't DM'd since the beginning of the year. Back in, I would say it's about just after March, April. I haven't DM'd for a long time. I normally Dungeon Master rather than play the game. Right now I'm playing a Dragonborn Paladin Sorcerer using wild magic. And I'm having a great time. And as for my favourite race, my most despised race is human, because I'm human, so why would I want to play a human? My favourite is definitely the Dragonborn. And my next favourite would have to be Half-Orc, as it happens. I know that sounds strange, because they're all sort of like monstrous creatures, but I like monsters, so I like races that are kind of monstrous in nature. Hence, that's why I tend to play those sorts of characters. My Dragonborn Paladin Sorcerer gets to roll on the Wild Magic Surge table every single time I cast a level 1 or up spell. Which means I think I have gone blue. I'm half the size I was. I'm 3 inches smaller than I was before. I'm blowing pink bubbles. I have a beard that's covered in feathers. Currently, I can't get drunk because I've acquired that feature. I've turned into a sheep. I've turned into a pot plant. I did that on Friday. First time. That was quite entertaining. So I've had quite a lot of fun playing as just a player rather than dungeon mastering. Okay. Len Garnett. What's that? That's something I really hate about some adventure modules. They have the backstory from hell, but no way for the players to find out or learn about it. That's exactly your issue, right? It's a whole lot of extra information which you have, but you have to figure out how to share that information with the players' characters. And it takes up space. So when I create stuff, I don't create stuff that I won't use. Stuff that I won't present to my players' characters. Stuff that I don't present to my players. Otherwise, why am I doing it? So all of the stuff that I always have is usually accessible in some way. It's just the players figuring out how to make that happen. They could go back in time, you know, go back in time and find out all that information if they really wanted to. Okay, Jonathan Thompson, sorry. How do you handle power gamers? Okay, so I don't know if you know, but I run public games, or did run public games, and there's a lot of power gamers in public games. They tend to be the people that are hard for a home group to pick up and stay with, because they are always looking for the next option and the combination that will give them the greatest advantage and that will break the game. They're not always about breaking the game, but they relish the concept of finding something that somebody else hasn't found so that they can be more successful. So how do I deal with power gamers? I give them limitations on the kinds of sources that they can use. So I don't let them use every single book that has been published or every single third-party content option for a player character or a race or a background. I don't really mind races and backgrounds so much. I generally will allow them to retrain. They get bored very quickly, so you have to allow them. Now, that's always outside of the game, so it needs to be either before the game or after the game, not during the game, where they can retrain. So they keep the same name, they keep the same equipment, they can change everything else out if they need to and rebuild it. And what will happen is they'll build a character that's more powerful, yes, but they'll build a character they're more interested in playing. And because they get bored so quickly, because they always need to be trying new stuff, that will help a lot to remedy that problem. I also encourage my power gamers, since I've had so many at the table at the same time, to share the information they have with the other people who are not quite experienced with the game. I will also make sure that I present encounters that are less about combat and more about a social interaction or achieving a goal, negotiating, skill challenges, traps, hazards, puzzles. Not so much puzzles. I don't tend to use a lot of puzzles in my games, or just requires exploration. And that's the ticket, really. If you present everything to them as a combat, then that's all they'll feed off. Once you start to make it clear to them that success is actually dependent on something other than combat and building their character for combat purposes, they will build their character to cover all of the different aspects of the game. So that's your social, exploration, and your combat. Does that make sense? Okay. If I haven't answered your question, Jonathan, you let me know. The Thundos. What's this? Got to say, I do love my other game where I play a half-orc detective. Half-orcs are awesome. I mean, they obviously the creation of the half-orc is kind of a bit iffy, but I love playing a half-orc. I've enjoyed playing just a full-blown orc, but I think a half-orc is much more complicated compared to just playing an orc. Antonio, do you have a model for your Dragonborn? What colour is he or she? I used to. I had my players created a was it a Hero Forge custom built miniature out of bronze? Was it bronze or brass? I think it was bronze, and it was a Paladin Sorcerer Dragonborn. I had that miniature, but it got stolen, and now I'm using a miniature that my Dungeon Master has purchased. I didn't realise he was going to do that I can use in the game for the character I'm playing. And I think it's the Dragonborn you'll find in the new Guildmaster's Guide to Ravnica miniature set. There's a Dragonborn sorcerer or wizard in there somewhere. So that's and it's a he. I don't generally try to play a different sex to myself, so usually I'll play the same sex just because I feel like I'm stepping on toes. That's just me. It's just my issues there. Okay, so while we're waiting for more questions to come through, and hopefully you'll let me know if I haven't answered your question successfully, let's go through the rule of cool. Okay, so being flexible. I know what people say when they say the rule of cool is about being flexible with the rules for the sake of having fun. But there's a couple of things you need to understand with being flexible with the rules. And I'm not discouraging you from being flexible with the rules. I do run a channel that talks about rules, and usually the stuff that I present is just the basics, and that's it. There's only a couple of rules videos that I have that are about variant rules. But you need to figure out what level of crazy do you want for your group, because it will get crazy if you are too flexible with the rules and how you handle them. The other thing is, once you bend a rule or break a rule, you're going to find that your players will latch onto that single moment that you've had in your game where you allowed it to take place, and they're going to want to duplicate that encounter somewhere. They'll find a time to duplicate the use of you bending and breaking the rule in this case, and they'll say, but what about the time when? And then you get yourself into this great huge pit of problems, and it often results in what I would call arguments that are usually just start off with just legitimate asking questions between players and the Dungeon Master, and then can turn into full-blown arguments. So there's one of the things you need to be careful. So once you bend and break the rule, the players will expect you to do it again should that situation arise. Being flexible if you are flexible with your rules, it can make the game a lot easier for the players to actually be successful with their characters. It will reduce some of the difficulty that you might see them have, which means you have to increase the challenge of the game and your encounters to compensate for that. So bear in mind, flexible rules means it tends to be making the game easier for the players' characters. So if that's what your rule is doing, and the way that you're being flexible and applying the rule of cool, then you're going to have trouble later on, trust me. Austin Townsend, what are the stats on that hat? The stats on that hat, I believe it is, let's say it's about 200 millimeters wide by about 250 from here to here, and maybe I'd say 120 high. It's probably going to blind you because it's so red. I get disadvantage when I'm dealing with a bull. So if there's a bull in a paddock, I should not enter that paddock because it will charge, and it won't target my groin or my body, it will go for my head. Those are the basic stats. In terms of attack rolls, it's not really sort of suitable for that sort of thing. It's not really designed for that. It's more to just shock people, you know, like that. Oh. Okay, back to the rule of cool while I'm waiting for the questions to come through. Sorry, I couldn't help myself. Now, Lethandos. I will try to make a video of the story of how I got stuck in the room by the spiders. It was a mega dungeon. Oh, well, nice. I wonder if it sounds like a interesting story for a video. I'm never too sure about whether making stories or videos about stories of games that I have had are always going to be that successful. I know people want me to do that. To be honest, I would just like to hang out with my sister and my family and some friends and just dress up and just do wacky things. I did that in the past. I just don't have time now. That's what I would probably be more interested in doing. What's that? The hat gives you a -3 to stealth. This is done. Well, yeah, I suppose it could be. Dungeons and Dragons 5e, I think it would be disadvantaged to stealth. Stealth checks get disadvantage, not a -3. We don't try to apply little numbers here, otherwise it gets too complicated, right? That's the whole idea of trying to make Dungeons and Dragons 5e more streamlined and easier to play. It's either advantage or disadvantage if we can help it, and that's it. So, disadvantage. Okay, next thing. When it comes to using the rule of cool, pick a significant moment in your game or encounter where you think it would apply. So if the players want to do it when there's a significant moment, that's a good time to do it, right? But what happens when the moment isn't significant, but it might still be cool if they get to do it? See, this is the thing that I struggle with the rule of cool. And I think a lot of people do, is what is considered a significant moment. If I disallow it, then that means it's definitely not going to be awesome and cool anyway. It could become a significant moment. So it's really not a really good measurement of when to use or when to apply the rule of cool. That's my general feeling. I know that's how some dungeon masters do it. They feel comfortable with doing it that way and it works for them. I know that's how Matthew Mercer applies the rule of cool. He looks for those moments where he thinks it's a significant moment, and giving people the opportunity to do it would be great. You need to be comfortable with it yourself though. Boundaries. So what happens to the boundaries? The boundaries for rule consistency get blurred when you start applying flexibility to the rules and the rule of cool. It's always going to be there. Every time you do something slightly out of the norm, it starts to venture into a variant role, and it starts to, you've set a precedence for doing it once, and it's, as I said, they expect it to continue. So you just need to be careful about that sort of thing, particularly if you're running at a table where consistency is really important. Otherwise, it's really hard to manage the people who are playing at the table. So just bear that in mind. You can also wind up stepping on the toes of some of the existing game mechanics of your game. So if you're playing Dungeons and Dragons 5e and you start applying a mechanic or an opportunity to do something that is duplicated by another class, another race, a feat, or some other feature in the game, then suddenly you've diminished the importance of using or taking those classes, races, or feats. Which is why I am always not terribly fond of the concept of having a codified game where everything is spelled out in detail. Even though I run a channel that talks about game mechanics, I do understand that. But it's not really that helpful if you want to do stuff that's cool, right? And you don't want to step on the toes and eliminate the need to go and take certain features that already exist in the game. So this is why I'm always not so fond of new class options or feats, and more interested in things like backgrounds and races, provided they aren't too extreme. That's just my view of it. So how do we, because the whole concept of the rule of cool is to encourage the use of heroic feats. You want your players to have their characters do something heroic and fantastic, and just encourage that. How do you do that? I have 3 things I want to say about that, but I'm going to get back to it. Leon Gunnut, what do you got here? As a DM, my allowance of the rule of cool depends on the originality of what or how they try to accomplish something. Fair enough, but I make it clear the same thing result may or cannot happen again. So Leon Gannett makes a really good point that when you do something that's outside of the game mechanics and you're applying the rule of cool, that it is actually really important to actually tell them that even though I'm doing it this time, that doesn't mean I'm going to do it every single time in my game. In this situation, I'm going to allow it because I think it would be awesome to see if it will be successful. But that doesn't mean it's always going to work. So it's a really good point. Well, and I was getting there. I was getting there, but you've made the point now, so it doesn't matter. Leon Gunnut, what do you got here? I found myself introducing hero points more often than not. Yeah, hero points, so you allocate a certain number of hero points, which allows them to use those hero points to do something that sort of breaks the rules a little bit, or gives them an advantage or a benefit in some way. I have used hero points before myself. I've also used fate points, the chips for playing the game Fate, which is not Dungeons and Dragons, a different game system. I've also used plot twist cards, which really open up the game a lot, and I'm going to talk about this a little bit more. I've done videos on this topic if you're wanting to check them out. Just type in plot twist cards and it'll come up. There's at least 2 of them. What do we got here? Greyeld. I hope I got your name right. Greyeld, what do you got here? Have you ever run a game for a single player? If so, was it rewarding, and have you any tips? Okay, so yes, I have run a short adventure for a single player, and I can say it wasn't that rewarding. I found there's not enough input at the table. Really, I spiced it up, and it was very forced. I actually find that a happy medium at my table is between 5 and 6 players. 7 plus is too many. 4 is all right. 3 is getting a bit quiet. I just feel like that's sort of that's the number that works for me. So I don't really find single player games that rewarding. I need a bit more going on. I need a bit more input coming in. Otherwise, it feels to me against them. Whereas I needed it to be more about a group getting together. Does that make sense? And I know it's not always possible to get enough people at your table to play the game. So I totally understand wanting to run a game for a single player if that's all you can find. And as for tips for doing it, I advertised on Facebook, I talked to people, I went to game groups, I went and played public games, and I just found more people to play the game. So that I didn't have one person or very few people. I approached my family, anybody who I thought might be interested. So that's my suggestion to you, is get more people at the table. There's so many people who want to play now. You got it right. Yep. Okay. Thank you. Thanks. Yeah, that was one of my concerns. I personally like 3 or 4 players. See, a lot of people don't like the idea of having too much input, and 3 or 4 works for them. And if that works for you, that's fine and that's good. Okay, I just need a drink of water and we will get back to the rule of cool while we wait for the questions to come through. Okay, so back to the rule of cool. And the question was, how do you encourage the players to have their characters do something that is heroic, fantastic, and awesome, so they're doing heroic feats? That's really the concept behind the rule of cool. So first off, if you have a situation that has a high risk to the player's character, but a low reward factor, so there's a very low chance of success. It will discourage your players from attempting it usually. So if jumping from this cliff face onto a dragon that's flying past so they can grapple onto it is high risk, and the chances are they fall 200 feet and then perish, and then the success and the chance of actually grabbing onto the dragon is so difficult that they're probably going to fail. That will discourage your players, when they have enough of those, from doing that sort of thing. So the rule of cool won't come into play because they won't even bother. They'll just look at the player's handbook and the rules that you have applied and presented them, and they'll look at their character sheet. If you have a high risk situation and there is a high reward, that will encourage the players to attempt things that use the rule of cool. If there's a high risk and a high reward, that will encourage them. So if the chance of leaping from, and think about it, when you're jumping off a cliff face onto a dragon and you grab onto it, if the dragon is able to do a spin and drop them anyway, then there's a very low chance of reward. But if they can, say for example, swing along a vine, or on a vine from tree to tree, and there's a high risk of falling into a whole lot of pits full of crocodiles or snakes or traps, but there's a high reward because there's a great huge expensive ruby at the other side that they can grab, or there's a magic item that they can gain. That's a high reward, and if the chance of success is not too difficult, it's not so easy for you to, it doesn't matter if they swing along, but unfortunately the third vine is so weak it's going to break under their weight and they crash to the ground because there's a 95% chance that vine will break. Then that's not going to really work too well. So high risk, high reward will encourage players to take risks, and you will apply the rule of cool when you can to something like that. 07. I'm not sure what 07 means, Chris. You'll have to explain that to me. 07. Does that mean 7 players? I don't know. You tell me. Okay, next. When it comes to a low-risk encounter or situation where the chance of hurting themselves or player character death is sort of very, very minimal, but there's a high reward, so they can get the magic item, but all they've got to do is just jump across a couple of stone pillars to get to it. That essentially means that it's very easy to do. There's a low risk of hurting themselves. They'll do it, okay? And essentially, your players will spam the snot out of that mechanic in that situation if they can. If you present that too much, low risk, high reward, you're going to get spammed. And you're going to wind up having to apply the kind of rule of cool so often it's not funny. And that will break down the consistency of your rule system. Now, if you're fine with that, great. But that's what's likely to happen. You just got to understand that. Salute. Chris, salute. Days high like a salute. Hello, Chris. Salute to you too. Oops, caps. Okay, I understand what you mean. Caps are a bit of a problem sometimes. Hello, Ethan. Hi from England. Man, I've noticed there's a lot of people from the UK watching my channel now. You guys must have a horrible time frame. It must be, yeah, there we go. There it is. Where it's 12:15 a.m. There's no good time frame for New Zealand and England. I would have to be up in the middle of the night or the middle of the morning, or it just doesn't work out. I totally understand though. I'm a beginner DM, and I was just wondering if you had any tips for creating compelling villains. Yeah, use villains you already know about and just change them so they don't look the same. So villains like, look, when you think about a villain and the villains that stand out for you, Darth Vader, Lex Luthor, what else we've got? We've got Asmodeus, Think about the elements. You know, villains work best if they have motives and reasons for doing stuff. Thanos, Marvel Studios, Thanos, his rationale for doing what he did is because it's in the best interest of everybody. That we have to sacrifice some for everybody else to live. So give them what seems like a perfectly logical reason for doing what they're doing. And that will make your villain much more successful. Build in, you know, when you build your villain, give it the same sort of aspects as a player's character, such as personality traits, ideals, bonds, and flaws. Those things will help beef it up. Sorry about that. I need to drink, otherwise I will lose my voice. Ethan, did that answer your question? If it didn't, you'll let me know. What do we got here? Just Frico. Hey, how's it going, Just Frico? If I got your name wrong, I do apologise. Just found your channel a few weeks ago. Thank you for great content. I'm a new player and found great and clear info. Well, I'm glad you have. I would like to point out though that some of my videos are getting a bit old, and the Wizards of the Coast design team have been making modifications, clarifications and changes to the rules, and some of my videos will be a bit out of date. So just bear that in mind. But if it's helping you, great, that's good news. Antonio, I'm in USA, United States of America. Where is everyone else? Well, I'm in New Zealand. It's pretty clear. I think it is, anyway. Railed, US, South Louisiana. Oh man, I've been talking too long. That's what it is. What's that, Chris? A lot. Watch your great YouTube caster. What? Or get your keys locked in your house. Ha ha. Yes, I did. I did lock my keys in my house and was stuck in my car. Very, very funny. I can't believe you watched that video. It was terrible. It was just ludicrous. I felt terrible because I wanted to be able to tell everybody that I couldn't make it. And the only thing I could think of was Wi-Fi through the house wall on my phone in the car. Jose Frico, what do you got here? Just played my first game. Awesome, glad to hear it. I'm a rogue, and any tips for using Thieves' Cant? My suggestion is just try everything you can with Thieves' Cant and see what your player, your Dungeon Master will allow. You've got to remember that Thieves' Cant really relies on what your Dungeon Master will allow you to do. So this is really, actually it's a good example of the concept of the rule of cool, because Thieves' Cant is quite open. It's not really tied down, it's not really set in concrete, it's not really completely clear what the limitations on it are. So it's possible to have quite a lot of room for movement. So yeah, just keep trying stuff. Pardon me. Frankie Doodle. Man, what a name. Awesome. How's it going? Thoughts on the feature bad reputation? What? Thoughts on the feature bad reputation? I'm not sure. I'm not sure what thoughts I should have on the feature bad reputation. Whose reputation are we talking about? You'll have to explain a bit more, Frankie, sorry. Leon Gunnett, what do you got here? Would you allow a player to play 2 characters at once instead of using a DM NPC? Well, first off, I don't think that a Dungeon Master should worry about playing an NPC in the game to compensate for the lack of players at their table. I've done a video on how to run small groups, and you're welcome to go and check that out. It doesn't look that hot. The thumbnail's pretty bad. It's just me in the car. So I think it is asking an awful lot. I think it's much smarter to allow the player's character to have, or player to have one character, and give them an animal companion who doesn't have any complex mechanics to use. If you really need the numbers at the table and you need to beef that up, but there's lots of other things you can do, like reducing the number of enemies and monsters that the player's characters will face, changing the difficulty of them, reducing hit points. So yeah, that's just my view. If, for example, what's that? If, for example, the party number of players were too few for an adventure you are running. So the problem only arises, remember, the problem of having a small party at your table only really arises when you start using things that are outside of just exploration and a social encounter. You can run your table, and so you use more exploration and social encounters that don't involve combat, traps, and things that will kill their characters. That's what I suggest. Have them start at a higher level and multi-class so that they have access to healing spells and other features so they can heal themselves or whoever goes down, particularly if you've only got 2 players or 3, and you know the numbers aren't high enough and you need everybody to sort of have some sort of way of healing themselves. Give out more healing potions. That's my view of it anyway. So focus more on exploration, social interactions, and less combat, and it's no longer an issue. Chris, what do you got here? Villains like in Daredevil, the TV show? Yep. Sigourney Weaver, yes, why not? Yes, character in the 2nd season, just wanted to live past her normal lifetime and isn't a villain in her own mindset. No, that's exactly right. She doesn't see herself as a villain. She sees herself as self-preserving herself and preserving herself. Otherwise, she's looking at death, and she has a way of changing that. Her moral and ethical code is completely different to somebody else, and she thinks that's normal. And villains operate the same way. Their code of ethics, moral, it's completely different. They don't necessarily see themselves as evil. They see this is how the world is. Ethan, thanks for the advice. I'll be sure to take that in mind. But now I just can't stop thinking about Darth Vader as a pirate riding a dragon and throwing fireballs. My players are gonna hate me. Yeah, but it doesn't need to look exactly like Darth Vader. He can have a metal mask. He can be dressed in black. You can give him a cape if you like, but I've been told that capes are notorious for getting characters, whether they be an NPC or a real character, killed. So maybe you shouldn't do the cape thing, but you can if you want. Force grip, you know, the ability to grip somebody and choke them out. You know, those are all things that Dungeons and Dragons, there's spells around that you could sort of make that do, or make some alterations. Kind of sounds cool though. I love it. Greyald, ha, you're having a good laugh there, good. Chris, thieves can't, being a language almost amongst thieves, but it is not obvious in my honest opinion. Yeah, well, I think it's as I said, it's so broad that there's, I mean, I couldn't give you anything with it. You just need to try stuff and see where you can go with it. Frankie Doodle, what do you got here? The sailor background variant gets the, the feature bad reputation, where the players with the feature can't get away with minor criminal offences. I was wondering what your thoughts are on this. I think it's I think it's fine. I honestly, if the player wants to pick up sailor background and they don't like the feature, then why would you pick the sailor background? The thing is with a sailor, it's building in an aspect to it that they've probably had a criminal record, and somebody is always watching them, so they've got to be careful about what they do. So when they get up to mischief, it needs to be on the sea where there aren't people policing them. But when they're in town, they're a threat. That's why sailors are always going back off to sea, right? So I don't really have a problem with it. That's my view. Okay, so we talked about the rule of cool. I'm still waiting for questions to come through, and we're getting up to, oh, what's the time? Oh, we're just over an hour now. I'm just going to take another drink of water. But I will give you guys a good chunk of time because this is the last Dungeon Master Q&A for this year, right? The rule of cool. I feel the rule of cool works best when there are no game mechanics that are pre-existing in the Dungeons and Dragons adventure system or game system, where there are no rules that would normally apply anywhere. So you have to, what do? So you apply something that will work that already pre-exists. There's a couple of mechanics that already exist that you can use. Things like the attack roll, your saving throws, your skill and ability checks. You set a DC, and DCs of 5 to 30, 5 being very, very easy, and 30 being near impossible. Okay, so use those. Those are there for you. The concept of the skill challenge, the skill contest, where whether you use a skill or an ability check, it's contested by somebody who's countering that, and you have to get greater than whatever they score to be successful, otherwise it's a standoff or a stalemate. Those are all there, and you can do pretty much anything you want with it with regard to the rule of cool. And pre-existing mechanics that are close enough that you can use them because they're suitable for what you're trying to have your players do with their character. The rule of cool works really well when there aren't any rules already written down in the player's handbook or anywhere else. That's the time to use it. Okay, so what do we got here? Oh, there's a whole bunch of questions that have come through very, very quickly. Can a rogue use fast hands to steal enemies' weapons? Well, it really depends on what your dungeon master will allow. I would say it's possible, but if you can be seen doing it, and they know you're there, it's not like you can just walk up to them, just roll a dice, and I just put my hand in their pocket and I've got it. So remember, there are things that you can't do because they would result in automatic failure. There's no point in rolling a dice. Don't pick up a dice and say, look, I've got a dice, I want to make a skill check. Oh, I got a 20, and that means with my modifier that's 32. So I succeeded at the impossible. It's not really going to work. It's not going to go down well, and it really is gaming the system and gaming the table too much. I've had that happen to me a few times, and I had to explain to my players there are things you can't do. It's a fantasy world, but you're getting a bit ridiculous now. It's not all about just rolling the dice and getting what you want, because the numbers say yes, you're successful. Okay, Greyald, how do you use alignment? Look, for me, alignment is just a description of how the player's character is currently operating in the world. I believe that alignment is simply a description, and if the player's character is moving away from their alignment and doing things outside of that on a consistent basis, then shift and change the alignment. It is not what predetermines what the character will do. A character throughout a campaign might have more than one alignment, and it might change as we go. And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. I don't get caught up in alignment. And in fact, often I don't even worry about it. If people tell me what their alignment is, and I say, okay, so you say you're neutral good, but every single person you ever come across, you kill them, you take their stuff, no matter what they are doing. I think that's more evil. You're doing evil acts now. That's not neutral good. So maybe you need to change your alignment description to something else. Just my view. What do we got here? All I do is keep track of the actions and adjust the alignment. Yes, over time, according, and then if they die, they end up in the corresponding plane Should I do more or less? You're doing exactly what you should be doing. It makes perfect sense. You know, I would tell the player, look, what you're doing is starting to shift your alignment. If you keep doing that sort of thing, it's going to shift your alignment. They might not like that, but you know, all alignment is a description of how their player's character is operating in the game. The PC is operating in the game. If you don't want evil characters in there and somebody's disguised their character as chaotic neutral so that they can try to get away with doing lots and lots of really sort of antisocial behaviors, just make it clear that, you know, they need to sort of adjust things. Particularly if it's affecting, if the other players and you don't really care about that sort of stuff and it's not concerning you, then just let it go. It just keeps going on. What have we got here? Ethan, of the 2 stereotypical D&D campaign starters, which is your favourite? A tavern or a prison? Man, I don't like that question. I don't like the prison or the tavern. I think they're both awful. If I have to do if I have to do anything, I'm definitely not going to go with the prison. I'll go with the tavern, and I'll blow that tavern up. They all meet in a tavern. They know each other for years, and then I'm going to burn it to the ground. Yeah, that's how we'll start it off. Yay. I've actually said this many times before. I say burn the tavern down. And now they've got nowhere to buy their grog. Now that's an adventure. They've got to go and get off to the winery and the ale house and bring in the supplies, rebuild the tavern. Greyland, what's that? Have I skipped something? Ethan, and if you regularly use a third place, what is it? What do look, I don't really use a third place. Everything is different. I've started off my group in a circus. I've started them off in a tavern. I've done the prison. I've done crew on a ship. All sorts of different things. If you really want me to do a video on campaign starters, I can probably do that at some point. I haven't really thought too much about doing that sort of thing because people haven't really asked enough and there hasn't been enough interest for me to sort of do it. And also too, I'm selfish and I will do the things that interest me more than anything else. But if, you know, if people want me to cover something like that, maybe it'll happen. Greyland, awesome, thank you. You're welcome, Greyland. Greyald. Is it Greyald? Greyald. I think it's Greyald. Sorry about that. Leon Gunnett, what do you got here? That example describes perfectly one of my players who always plays the rogue like a Skyrim character. He insists he is neutral, or probably true neutral. Yeah, okay, yeah, I can believe it. Often they'll use chaotic neutral as an example, but he goes and steals anything and kills everyone. Yeah, he's not playing true neutral. True neutral does a bit of everything, really, and it's not even as clear and as distinct as that. I actually feel that the concept of alignment is less important to your game, and it's more important about explaining. I just say to my players, look, I run a good campaign. I'm not really here for you to run an evil campaign where you do evil things. So if you want to just be evil characters, go find another dungeon master, because that's not for me. If I want to run an evil campaign, I will let you know. And if I ever run an evil campaign, it will probably be that all of the characters are goblins and orcs. That's my view on it anyway. The Ungunnit, what do you got here? He always gets his alignment changed to lawful or chaotic evil. Yeah, lawful evil or chaotic evil. I can believe that. Joyce Frico, what do you got here? For example, a cleric's alignment can stop a player from doing certain things. Should a DM stop him from doing certain things that go against his alignment? No. the player controls the character. And if what they are doing is going to affect their alignment, let them shift their alignment. It's fine. The only time I feel a dungeon master should tell a player that their character can't do something is when they're going to impact the other players at the table, and it's going to be detrimental to that player in such a way that they are upset and annoyed and angry by what they're trying to do. I always explain to my players that if they do something to another character who's in your party and they're not happy for you to do that, particularly like casting spells or making attacks or doing something that will hurt them as well or impart a condition, you need to ask permission, because you are a team. And if you're not operating as a team and you're working against each other and you're just going to be a spanner in the works and a little gremlin, then hey, they shouldn't have to put up with that. And I've always had more than enough people at my table that I can say goodbye to somebody. Usually I don't need to do that. A conversation between them is usually enough. And I don't usually necessarily bring up that conversation when everybody has left the table. I will often do that at the table right then and there. Because the great thing about having a group of people is peer pressure. So if people are being difficult and antisocial and just trying to be a dick, they'll get sorted out pretty quickly. They'll know where they stand. That's not to say that I will do it in such a way that I will humiliate them at the table. Does that make sense? I'm just usually just upfront and clear about what's going on. Just Rico, I'm saying a cleric, for example, he can't do evil. Well, I think that maybe the deity that the cleric worships would have an issue with that, and maybe that deity would remove the divine power that has been given to that cleric. But as a dungeon master, I wouldn't stop the player from playing the character that way. Maybe they wind up playing a fallen cleric. Maybe they wind up adopting a new deity who gives them powers. That's just my view. Does that make sense? Greyeld, I would love to see a video on campaign starters. It seems like you have asked. If more people ask, maybe I'll do it. Right now I've got a bit too much going on, but we'll see how we go. Ethan, ditto. Okay, so that's two. Two for campaign starters. All right. Okay. Do I have a third? Do I get a third? Frankie Doodle, what do you got here? Can you share one of your favourite moments playing D&D? For example, an encounter, a character death, a long-awaited character twist, and etc. Okay, I will. Years ago, I was playing as a player. I wasn't the dungeon master at that time. I was playing in the Red Hand of Doom. It was Dungeons and Dragons 3.5, and we went into the swamp. We had done fabulously. We did a great job up to then. We were doing so well, and the swamp unraveled us. And my character had died. We'd been fireballed from all sides from mages that had been up in the trees. I built a new character. I spent a whole lot of time, built a background around it, and really spent heaps of time trying to make it really cool. And I created a paladin, and I was very pleased with myself. The first time out I played this character, it died. I came across a Hydra, and everybody else stayed back, and I tried to tank the Hydra, and the Dungeon Master had every single head attack me, which makes perfect sense because I'm the only one who's in reach. The end result is that my body got torn to shreds. He rolled a lot of criticals. I took a lot of damage in one round. I didn't even have time to do anything because there was surprise involved. And that was the end of that. And I remember just sitting there, just laughing my head off. And I was so shocked by what had taken place. Because the Dungeon Master knew how much time I'd spent building this character. I don't do that now. I don't spend that much time building my characters anymore. The Dungeon Master knew what had happened. I don't blame the Dungeon Master for what had taken place. They didn't fudge the dice. They just rolled what it was and let it play out. The game is like that sometimes, where you can spend all this time and you think you're doing the right thing, and the next thing you wind up getting done. I don't know if it's necessarily funny, but it's one of the stories I haven't told. Anyway. Cool Keg Computer. How's it going, Cool Keg Computer? Hey Fred, a long time since I've caught you in a live stream. Yes, it has been a while. Can't make it to the game. Alright. What? Da-da-da-da. Sorry, what's that? Live stream. Busy with school, I understand that. But thinking about starting a campaign over the winter. Fair enough. Okay, alright. What do you do if last minute on your... What? Sorry? What do you do if last minute one of your party members can't make it to the game? I keep running the game. I don't stop. Just because people can't make it, I just run the game. I don't worry about it. Who cares? I don't make my campaign revolve around one character at the table. It's about the whole group. Do you cancel? I very rarely cancel. The only time I will cancel the game is if we have less than 3 players. If we go down to 2, I stop. I usually say, okay, we'll do something else tonight. Let's go to the movies, or let's play a different board game. We won't play Dungeons and Dragons. If I know that we can continue to play and there's not going to be any combat, and that would be fine, sometimes we'll do that. But usually we just go and do something else. Go on with the campaign, pretend that he or she doesn't exist, play for him or her. No, I don't. I just have their character fade into the background. Most of the players will create some reason why their character isn't there. I don't even bother with that. I don't even concern myself. I don't care. I just don't worry about that sort of stuff. I create less stress for myself by just not giving a two hoots about that sort of stuff. Trust me, less stress, much less stress. The players who have an issue with it will come up with a reason why that character is not at the table. Done. What's that? I'm having trouble now seeing what I'm looking at. What have we got here? Ethan. I woke up my brother and asked him. He said no, but I'm going to assume that my dog, Sparky, wants to, so... Oh, God. Really? Another vote? Okay. Alright. So you reckon the dog gets a vote on campaign starters? You're really pushing it. You know, my brother-in-law has told me that I need to have a dog in every single video I do, because apparently that's really good for marketing everything. Doesn't matter what it is, have a dog. I don't know that I'll do that, but maybe I'll think about it. Probably not. Maybe I'll just take the piss out of it instead. Leon Gunnett. Fred Jenskins. Yeah, it really wasn't like a Leroy Jenskins or a Fred Jenskins. It was more like we're near the swamp by this pool. Let's have a look. There's something under the water. Bam, Hydra. Bam, you're dead. You got eaten and torn to shreds by 5 Hydra heads. Wow. Anyway, the good news is the party did survive and they did live and the Hydra did die, but so did my character. Hell Hydra. Yes, Hell Hydra. Frank Doodle. Frankie Doodle, you're right. Josie Franco. How long do your sessions normally run? And how often do you run them? I would normally try to run my game every week, and for about 3 or 4 hours. Sometimes I would run them for 2 hours or 2.5 hours. Anywhere between 2 and 4 hours. Anything more than that, and it's too long. I can't take it. It's too much for me. Causes me hassles. I wind up getting tired. I've got to get up the next day and do stuff. Okay, while we're waiting for questions, and we're almost finished because I'm going to go through and talk about the rule of cool again. So very codified game systems will limit the concept of the rule of cool. So it means that what will happen is your players look at the player's handbook, the rule books, and their player's character sheet. That's essentially what will take place. That's usually what I find with regard to the rule of cool. Now, with regard to something like plot twist cards, which I've used, now trust me, I've used these things with a player only using one, and players all getting 3 each. Now 3 each is a lot of cards. And over time I increased the number. I don't use them anymore, but I did use them, and it helped me to learn to improvise. Because what would happen is it allows the players to take control of elements of the game, whether that be monsters, events, magic items, everything that affect the game's story, that normally the Dungeon Master controls. Now, you have to be willing as a Dungeon Master to allow that sort of stuff to take place. Normally what I would do when a player would play a card and I say, no, look, that I can't accept, I would allow them to pull a new card and I would take the old card off them when they tried to do something that I felt was just too much. So there was always sort of an opportunity to use the card as... But the problem with these I found too is they tended to turn into Magic the Gathering. It wasn't Dungeons and Dragons anymore, it was Magic the Gathering. It's all right to begin with. I found it was really useful for me to learn how to improvise. It turns the game into a completely different game system, particularly if you use a lot of them. I think the problem I found with using them as a reward for players is if you don't get them very often, there's often not an opportunity to use them in the right situation, and therefore they can wind up stacking them up over time, trying to find that situation where they will work and where I would allow them as the Dungeon Master to use them. So power gamers will abuse plot twist cards big time. So you've got to be careful with that. I found that was the ultimate breaking point for me, was when the power gamers saw this and just said, okay, I know what you're trying to do, cool. And they would just keep drawing new cards. They'd suggest something else and straight away draw a new card. And eventually I realized I needed to let it go, and so I did. I've seen players use these cards to sabotage the entire party's success by including a Kraken at a time when they're really not capable of dealing with a Kraken, or bringing a Kraken back to life as an undead Kraken. They'll sit there and they'll try to figure out how to stack all of their cards all at once, so that I've got to try to figure out how it's going to work. Never allow the players to get you to figure out how the cards are going to work at the table. Always get them to describe what they're trying to do with the cards, or when you're using the rule of cool. Okay? I've done videos on plot twist cards. Always make sure you throw it back on the player. Explain to me what you're trying to achieve and trying to do before you start saying, yes, you can try that. It doesn't mean you'll be successful, but yes, you can try that. Okay. What do we got here? Mel. Hi, Mel. It's been a while. Haven't caught you in a while either. Any new mini creations? As it happens, Mel, and I know you like the monster crafting videos, I'm not doing any painting right now, and that's because I'm trying to get another job. So what we're going to do is, instead of me painting in 2019 during summer when the paint will just not dry, it's just too humid, it's too hot, and the paint just goes all tacky, I'm going to make monsters. I've made monsters before. I thought in January of 2019 we'll make some elementals and some golems. I thought that was a really good idea, to make something that's sort of hard to get as a dungeon master in the form of a miniature. So that's what I'm going to focus on, is trying to make sort of constructs, things that you can include, you know, water elemental, air elemental, fire elemental, earth elementals, and lots of golems made out of a variety of different items. So we'll see how that goes. So yes, those are my ideas, and only time will tell how successful I am. You know what it's like. Are you looking forward to that? Good. I'm glad you will be, because I'm looking forward to it too. Okay, I'm going to lose my voice, so I'm going to wrap it up here. So if you have a last minute question, you need to be quick about it while I have a drink of water. Because I have been talking for almost an hour and a half, which is a long time. Okay, so if you found this video helpful and informative, please consider sharing and liking the video. Look, subscribe if you like this sort of thing, because I do this sort of thing once a month, and I do other videos too, so that's all good. So subscribe, hit the bell button to be notified when I go live and when I publish new videos. If you want to support my channel, you supported my channel by watching this video. I have many more videos you can watch if you want to. There's bound to be something that you'll find interesting. I don't do Patreon, but down in the description you'll find affiliate links to the book depository and Amazon, where you can buy stuff online. I get a small commission. You pay exactly the same price. Go through the link, buy what you want. You do not have to buy the thing I have linked to. And that's it. Your opportunity to ask questions in the live chat and the comments is here. What's this? Grailed, thanks for the advice. You were very informative and straightforward. Good, I'm glad I was. That's excellent news. So if you weren't part of the live stream, that's what the comment section's all about. You can say hi, you can ask your questions, and you never know. Comments might turn into videos. Who knows? It's always possible. Anyway, till next time, keep rolling those 20s. It's one of these things. Thank you, Frankie. Thank you very much. I do appreciate it.